cases are surging in many parts of the country, prompting Queensland to offer vaccines for free. There are concerns the flu will add to the burden on the health systems already dealing with high COVID case numbers. The AMA's Vice President, Dr. Chris Moy, says making flu vaccines more accessible should be a national goal.
The combination of us having to face our first full flu season for 3 years with 4 hospitals already and a pattern of the flu where the peak is between 15 and 24 does give some good argument to try and make sure that group is vaccinated. 3 people have been charged over a suspected shooting in Sydney's southwest. Police were called to a unit block late last night after several people reported hearing a gunshot. A man in his 40s was taken to hospital with a gunshot wound to his hand. 2 women charged with concealing a serious indictable offence. A 25-year-old man charged with concealing a knife. Our top story again, at least 14 children and a teacher have been killed in a shooting at a primary school in the US state of Texas. ABC News. A senior bureaucrat suspended over the controversial principal recruitment saga that engulfed the Queensland government 2 years ago has been found to have committed misconduct and could be sacked.
Jeff Hunt was the Deputy Director General of the Education Department when the opposition raised concerns about the recruitment process for a school principal for the new inner-city South State Secondary College. In May 2020, Commission launched an investigation into the matter. The findings cleared Ms. Trad. It can now be revealed a disciplinary probe has found Mr. Hunt engaged in misconduct and that serious consideration would be given as to whether to dismiss him. The Public Service Commission says the disciplinary process can now proceed.
The Northern Territory government's released a list of remote communities where selling and drinking alcohol could be legal from July. The details from Jesse Thompson.
The government last week passed legislation letting dozens of communities decide if they want liquor restrictions in place beyond when bans from the 2007 intervention expire in 2 months. It's now named the communities where alcohol could become legal after July the 17th. They include Bellewen, Nirrupee and Pepperminati, as well as close to 40 town camps across the NT. Those communities now need to opt in to liquor restrictions if they want them to continue. Bans will remain in place in the vast majority of communities that had alcohol restrictions before the intervention.
An Indigenous corporation trying to save several Wurundjeri artworks from auction wants help from state and federal governments. The Wurundjeri Oi Warang Cultural Heritage Corporation is trying to raise money to buy the painting and shield created by 19th century artists. They're expected to be awarded $90,000 Australian at auction in New York early tomorrow morning. Wurundjeri elder Ron Jones says Australia has a responsibility to look after culturally important items.
It's a part of your soul that this bloke is going to sell, and he should not be selling it. It should be brought back to Australia. Government should be standing in and do something about it. And they're fair dinkum about reconciliation of Aboriginal people on their event. Well, let them come to the party and bring this back to Australia.
The discovery of T cells in the human eye could change the way diseases that cause blindness or pain are treated. For the first time, immune cells have been observed in the corneas, the transparent outer layer of the eye. It was thought those cells wouldn't be found in healthy people. The Dowie Institute for Infection and Immunity says it could change how we think about and treat diseases such as herpes and dry eye.
They can protect the eye against the infection, but then they actually hang around there and stay there for many, many months. Small number of them lying in wait, ready to protect against the infection again.
Poland's president warned the war in Ukraine could lead to major food shortages in Africa and a subsequent migration crisis in Europe. Correspondent Steve Kinane.
President Duda told the World Economic Forum in Davos that the disruption to the grain supply from Ukraine caused by the war could lead to instability. Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters of wheat and corn, and deliveries of grain have been cut off by Russian warships blockading the country's Black Sea ports. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen accused Russia of using food supplies as a weapon in the same way it has with energy. Lithuania has proposed a naval escort using warships to help move grain securely from Odessa.
Now with sport, Jack Snape.
Australian tennis player Alex de Minaur has suffered a heartbreaking 5-set loss to Hugo Gaston in the first round of the French Open. The young Frenchman rallied after being 3 games down in the final set to win 4-6, 6-2, 6-3, love 6, 7-6. The result leaves Jason Kugler as the only Australian left in the men's draw, with Ayla Tomljanovic and Daria Seville in the women's. Australian cyclist Jai Hindley has beaten race leader Richard Carapaz to 3rd place on a mountainous stage 16 of the Giro d'Italia to close to 3 seconds off the lead. He says he would have liked to gain more time but was pleased with the result.
To get the bonus seconds at the finish there and also gain time other than some other GC guys.
Australian cricketer Matthew Wade has scored 35 runs to help the Gujarat Titans beat the Rajasthan Royals by 7 wickets to book a place in the Indian Premier League final. And Fremantle Sam Strikowski has been suspended for 2 AFL matches for a so-called chicken wing tackle on Collingwood's Jack Ginnivan on Sunday.
Our top story again, 15 people, including 14 children and a school teacher, have been killed in a shooting at a primary school in the US. ABC News. You're listening to ABC News Radio.
Thomas Ariti with you this Wednesday, the 25th of May. Great to have your company. So just repeating that breaking news, at least 14 children and 1 teacher have been killed after a shooting in a primary school in the US state of Texas. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Also today, Labor is close to the seat that needs to hold majority government.
I'm very much looking forward to them being open to being more ambitious around some of the goals and targets.
Still optimism within the new crossbench, though, that they will have influence over the parliament. And winter not far away, fresh calls to provide free flu vaccinations to all Australians, with concerns about a tough season ahead. Let's just take a closer look at what we know now in the US. Is breaking news. It's just coming out now. The governor of Texas says 15 people have been killed in a shooting at an elementary school. Greg Abbott says the suspected shooter, who's been identified so far as an 18-year-old man, also died and was believed to be killed by police. Of course, a lot we don't know at the moment, but what we have been told, 14 children and 1 teacher killed at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. That's about 85 miles west of San Antonio. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar is the representative for Texas's 16th congressional district that's based in neighboring El Paso.
Obviously, there are still lots of facts that are outstanding, still a lot that we don't know about the gunman, about his motivation, about how he got his gun, who else might have been involved. And I know that as that information becomes public, it will be very helpful. But right now, what the community of Uvalde needs is all of us sending our prayers and acknowledging the deep trauma and pain that community is going through right now, and the deep trauma and pain that they are going to suffer from, not just in the weeks to come, but frankly in the years to come. But it's a horrible situation, and it's, unfortunately now an American problem that it seems many lawmakers refuse to solve. And the problem is that firearm homicides have increased 40% for people between the ages of 10 and 24 years old in America. Those are the stats for 2020. It's unacceptable, and I can't believe lawmakers refuse to act.
So for people who don't know much about Uvalde, it is a town of about 15,000 in the southwestern part of the state of Texas. According to census figures, it's more than 3/4 Latino. Uvalde. We do not know the motive. We do not know what happened. But obviously, these are children, whatever color they are. It doesn't matter. But there is obviously the possibility that this violence is not unrelated to what we saw in 2019 with the El Paso shooting.
And you're right, Jake. We don't know, and so I'm going to withhold really any comment. I hope it was not race related. I really do pray that it was not, because I will tell you that adds an additional layer of significant trauma for children especially those of us who are members of Congress who have lived through mass shootings. You know, we know what's next, and we know the best way to help and to ensure that people are given the opportunity to breathe and heal. And so I told him I'm here for him. If he needs me, my office is here for him. And there's unfortunately a group of members of Congress who will be there for him because we've lived through what he is living through, he and his community.
Democratic Congresswoman Veronica Escobar speaking with CNN's Jay Tappas, and it's repeating what we know now. This news just breaking in the United States, and we have heard from the governor of Texas about it. 15 people killed in a shooting at an elementary school. It's been identified as Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, just west of San Antonio in Texas. Of the 15, 14 children and one teacher were killed. We've also been told the suspected shooter has been identified so far as an 18-year-old man also died and was believed to be killed by police. That's what we know so far out of the US state of Texas. We'll bring you more on that when it comes in. Almost 4,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Australia since the Russian invasion of their country, and for many it's a time of upheaval and distress. So a Sydney doctor who has family in Ukraine has created an informal network of Ukrainian and Russian-speaking health professionals to help the new arrivals adjust to life here. Claudia Jamble filed this report.
At a hall in Lismore in Sydney's west, there's a buzz of activity and a familiar language as recently arrived Ukrainians get a chance to meet each other and share stories. Gatherings like these have helped Olga Dorish, her husband and their kids, aged 10 and 14, adjust to life in suburban Kellyville, a long way from the home they fled in Chornomorsk near Odessa.
Sometimes, especially my daughter, my girl, she cried in the evening, and she remembered her lost friends and toys and cat and grandmother, grandfather.
Sydney-based psychiatrist Tanya Duss, whose cousin is living on the outskirts of Kyiv, is a regular at these meet and greets and has heard many similar stories.
As a child who's been exposed to lots of air raid sirens, and his family has fled under horrendous circumstances, and is having, a lovely time experiencing the beach and the surf in Australia for the first time, and then a shark alarm goes off, which just completely, upset him.
When Ukrainians first started arriving in Australia, most were on tourist visas, meaning they didn't have access to Medicare and didn't know how to navigate our health system.
I think anyone who's come from what was the old Soviet system is often a little bit suspicious of governments as well and government agencies, so we try and foster that.
35 GPs, nurses, counsellors and specialists have been helping the new arrivals navigate the health system while also providing general support.
Most of the need has been the psychology or GPs. There's a lot of traumatised children in particular, and parents will often be more likely to seek support for the children than themselves. What we find once you've assisted children, you are actually helping the whole family to get support.
Neurologist Dr. Stephen Duma is one of the volunteers.
They're very pleased actually that they can speak in their native language with a healthcare professional. It's much easier that way rather than calling an interpreter via telephone, for example.
Olga Dorish says she didn't expect so many Ukrainian and Russian speakers within the health system.
For me, it's very big supporting and very big surprise that I meet people who know Ukrainian language and English.
And while it's difficult to be so far away from the rest of her family, she feels safer here in Australia.
For my kids, I feel it will be better to stay in Australia than stay in basement in Ukraine.
Ukrainian arrival Olga Dorosh there, ending that report from Claudia Jamble. So votes are still being counted, but Labor remains on track to form government in its own right. At the moment, 74.1% of the votes counted. 6 seats are still in doubt. Labor at 74. That magic number is 76 for a majority. The LNP is on 56 at the moment. So big questions here about the new, much larger cross-bench. And if Labor does have a majority, fair to say they'll have less influence over the parliament than what might have been the case. With many of the newly elected independents representing electorates looking for change, the question is now how they'll deliver it. Tom Lowry's been taking a look.
The election's teal wave was bigger than many expected.
Our government wasn't listening to us, so we've changed the government.
New MPs like Monique Ryan, Zoe Daniel, Kylie Tink, Sophie Stomps and Kate Cheney will enter Parliament with a mandate from their voters to create change. But Labor looks set to form majority government, meaning Anthony Albanese won't be forced to negotiate bills through the lower house. And crossbenchers can't strong-arm the government into making changes. It's a familiar position for returning independent MP Helen Haines, who insists the crossbench can still carry plenty of influence.
Far from irrelevant, in fact highly influential, and I think what we've seen with this surge now of new independents joining the Parliament indicates how influential to the voting public of Australia the crossbench was last time and indeed will be again.
She points to issues like climate change and integrity as two issues championed by the crossbench that now sit high on the political agenda. Her own private member's bill will likely form the model for the new government's eventual Integrity Commission. And Helen Haines says she's already been assured this government will have a different relationship with the crossbench than the last.
I think there's reforms and potential ways of truly utilising this new and expanded crossbench in a way we haven't used before. And I don't think that's contingent upon there being a minority government.
Much of that, however, will rest on the willingness of the government to work with the independents, even if it's not obliged to. Stronger action on climate change was a common theme across the independent campaigns. Kylie Tink, the soon-to-be member for North Sydney, says given the success of campaigns like hers, the government has to be willing to listen.
I'm very much looking forward to understanding how this government sees their climate policies rolling out, and I'm very much looking forward to them being open to being more ambitious around some of the goals and targets.
One of her new colleagues to the north, Dr. Sophie Stomps in McKellar, says it's the job of independents to put issues on the agenda that otherwise wouldn't be there.
I think independents have a very vital role in leading the national conversation on important issues, which maybe the major parties aren't particularly happy to talk about.
While the independents in the lower house might have missed out on the opportunities of minority government, those in the Senate are in a very different situation. David Pocock, the former rugby union player, could wind up with a crucial vote if his spot in the Senate is confirmed. Kelly O'Shannessy from the Australian Conservation Foundation says more broadly the success of the Teal campaigns sends a pretty clear message.
I think the Australian people have really moved away from the major parties in this election towards parties and independents that have really strong climate policy. So the Australian people's ambition for climate change is higher than the ambition of our major parties right now, and it is something for the major parties to really reflect on.
Kelly O'Shannessy there from the Australian Conservation Foundation, ending Tom Lowry's report. So before we move on, just repeating that breaking news out of the US state of Texas at the moment. 14 children and one teacher killed in a shooting at a Texas elementary school. That's Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, just west of San Antonio. The 18-year-old gunman, we've been told, has also been shot dead as well. This news coming from the governor of Texas. Police have just held a press conference and will bring you some of that shortly. What we know at the moment is the gunman was a resident of the community, entered the school with a handgun, possibly a rifle, and opened fire. As I say, the shooter likely killed by responding officers. That's what we know at the moment, but we'll bring you more from the police shortly. Of Texas, 14 children and one teacher dead at a shooting in an elementary school just west of San Antonio. We'll have more on that coming up. Taking a look at finance now, though, a volatile session on Wall Street. The Nasdaq closed 2.3% lower to 11,264. The S&P 500 also in negative territory overnight in the United States, down 0.8% to 3,941. Different story for the Dow Jones, pretty flat. It's closed up 0.15% or 48 points to 31,928. Similar pattern for the SPY 200 locally, up 0.1% or 8 points in futures trade this morning to 7,130. The Aussie dollar 71.08 US cents this morning, 56.7 British pence, 66.2 euro cents, 90.1 Japanese yen and $1.10 at New Zealand. Oil's down. West Texas Intermediate crude trading at $110 US a barrel. Gold's up though, $1,865 US an ounce. We have the news headlines coming up in just a minute. Let's take a look at the weather for the meantime though. In Brisbane, showers increasing today, a forecast top of 23 degrees. It's 16 now. In Sydney, a possible morning storm, showers and a top of 12 now. In Canberra, morning fog, otherwise fine and 16, 4 now in the national capital. Sunshine in Melbourne today and 19, currently 8. For Hobart, sunny and 16, it's 3 now. In Adelaide, showers today, a top of 19, currently 16 degrees. Heading west, mostly sunny today in Perth, the forecast top of 21, it's currently 10. And for Darwin, sunny and 33, 24 now in the top end. Thanks for your company on ABC News Radio across Australia this morning. Eastern Standard Time is 7:30. It's 7 o'clock in the centre and 5:30 in the west. Which means it's time for the latest news headlines. A very good morning to Helen Zarinas.
Morning, Tom. There's been another mass shooting in the United States, this time at a school in Texas. At least 14 children and a teacher have been killed. The shootings happened at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, west of San Antonio. The gunman was 18 years old and has been shot dead by police. Anthony Albanese returns to Australia today after attending the Quad Alliance. It was his debut on the world stage just hours after being sworn in as Prime Minister. A joint statement by the leaders, including those of the US, Japan and India, welcomed the new Australian government's commitment to stronger action on climate change. Former federal Liberal MP Dave Sharma says Scott Morrison was a drag on the party's vote in the once blue ribbon seat of Wentworth. Mr Sharma lost the Sydney electorate to independent Allegra Spender, who ran on a platform pushing stronger action on climate change and integrity. Iron ore miner Fortescue Metals is being taken to court for native title compensation in the biggest case of its kind in Australia. The Injibandi people were awarded native title over land where Fortescue Metals mines in the Pilbara in Western Australia. But negotiations over a compensation deal fell through, and now the Injibandi people are returning to the federal court. The Australian Medical Association says free flu vaccines should be considered at a national level. Flu cases are surging in many parts of the country, prompting Queensland to offer vaccines for free. There are concerns the flu will add to the burden on health systems already dealing with high COVID case numbers. And a man will face court in Melbourne accused of pretending to be a guest at several weddings and stealing gifts. The 24-year-old's charged with stealing more than $16,000 of gift cards, jewellery and cash from receptions over the past 2 months. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Helen. It's Wednesday the 25th of May. Great to have your company.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
I'm Thomas O'Reilly making news this morning. At least 14 children and 1 teacher have been killed at a shooting at a primary school in the US state of Texas. We'll have more on that next. Also today, Labor's close to reaching the 76 seats it needs to hold majority government.
I think independents have a very vital role in leading the national conversation on important issues, which maybe the major parties aren't particularly happy to talk about.
But those on the new crossbench remain hopeful they will still have influence, and experts call for free flu vaccinations across the country as cases surge. To the breaking news out of the United States now. Police in Uvalde, Texas have just given an update on the and a teacher killed at an elementary school. Speaking just a short time ago, here's the Chief of Police, Pete Arredondo.
At approximately 11:32 a.m. this morning, there was a mass casualty incident at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. This school has children that are in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. I can confirm right now that we have several injuries, adults and students, and we do have some deaths. The suspect is deceased at this point. DPS is assisting with the investigation, and at this point the investigation is leading to tell us that the suspect did act alone during this heinous crime. Families are being notified, and we are providing services to them as the district should. As far as the rest of the district is concerned, safety measures were taken to make sure that we had a safe release for the rest of the district throughout our city of Uvalde. And we had numerous law enforcement officers and agencies that assisted with the safety release for those students. We do want to keep all their families in their prayers. I hope you do as well. And we also want to respect the privacy of the family. The crime scene is still being worked on, and again, we'll notify the parents and the families as soon as we have some news for them.
So that's the Chief of Police for Uvalde there, Pete Arredondo, giving an update just a short time ago in the US state of Texas, the Ross Elementary School west of San Antonio, and just repeating what we know now, 14 children, 1 teacher dead in this elementary school shooting. The gunman so far has been identified as an 18-year-old male, and the gunman has been confirmed dead. He entered the school with a handgun, possibly a rifle, at 11:30 in the morning, Texas time, and we'll bring you more on that when it comes to hand.
You've arrived at your destination.